have a lot of friends? Well, I bet you do. I have a lot of friends too, and so does Richard, the main character in the novel, Dear Mr. Kilmer. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hello, dear students. I am Mr. Syed Dahuri Azmira bin Syed Mutalib from SMK Bandar Baru Darul Aman. Today, we will discuss a question on paper 2, section D, and that is on the novel, Dear Mr. Kilmer. And the question is, state the friendships between the main character and other characters in the novel. Describe how their friendships developed. Provide textual evidence from the text. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to state the friendship between Richard and his friends by giving specific events in the text and describe the beginning of their friendships. I believe every one of you know 2 obvious friends that Richard has. Could you tell me the names of Richard's friends? Yes, you are right. Richard's first friend is Hannah Shermer, and his second friend is, of course, Mr. Kilmer. Now, we will go in details to describe the friendship between Richard and Hannah. As you know, there are many evidence from the novel that show how close Richard was to Hannah. But for today, we will choose only 2 examples of their special bond of friendship. The first example is when Richard signed a sympathy card to Hannah. The second example is when Richard refused to take part in the school drama. Always remember to elaborate your answers by giving examples from the novel. This is the way to explain on the first event when Richard signed a sympathy card to Hannah. One day, Mrs. Hanson was very angry and sad because some students vandalized the shop owned by Hannah's parents. The students hated Hannah and her family simply because they were Germans. To show their regrets for their action, Mrs. Hanson asked all students to sign a card to Hannah. However, nobody wanted to sign the card. Richard was the only one who signed the sympathy card. He even sent the card to Hannah by himself. The friendship between Richard and Hannah was clearly presented in the novel. And this is the elaboration on the second example, when Richard refused to take part in the school drama. One day, Mrs. Hanson held an essay competition. The best female essay writer would take the role of Lady Liberty, and the best male writer would take the role of the doughboy. Hannah won the best female essay writer, and therefore she would play Lady Liberty. And Richard won the best male essay writer, hence he would play the doughboy. Most of the students did not agree with Mrs. Hanson when she chose Hannah to play Lady Liberty. The students disagreed with Mrs. Hanson because Hannah was a German. Some parents even went to the principal's office because they also disagreed with Mrs. Hanson's decision. Richard felt it was unfair to Hannah. Therefore, he decided not to take part in the school drama too. This shows how close Richard was to Hannah. Now, we would like to highlight the friendship between Richard and Mr. Kilmer. I would like to remind you one more time, it is very important to elaborate on your answers by giving the evidence from the text. Who introduced Mr. Kilmer to Richard? Yes, you are right. It was Mrs. Hansen, Richard's English teacher. This is how you explain the friendship between Richard and Mr. Kilmer. One day, Mrs. Hansen, Richard's English teacher, read a poem which was written by Mr. Joyce Kilmer to Richard and his classmates. Richard was very interested in the poem. Richard asked Mrs. Hansen about Mr. Kilmer. Richard managed to get Mr. Kilmer's address. Then Richard wrote a letter to Mr. Kilmer, who was a soldier and also a famous poet. This was the beginning of Richard's friendship with Mr. Kilmer. And of course, you can further elaborate on the frequent exchanging letters between Richard and Mr. Kilmer, on how Mr. Kilmer kept giving advice to Richard to continue writing poems, and how sad Richard was when he knew the death of Mr. Kilmer in the war. You can always discuss these events with your teachers at school. Remember earlier, I told you that Richard had two obvious friends, which were Hannah and Mr. Kilmer. This is what I love about literature, particularly the novels. Literature allows us to go free with our imaginations. It allows us to see things from different angles. For example, when we talk about friendship, we should not limit ourselves by just only talking about the obvious friends that Richard has. What about Richard's family members? What about Richard's father or Richard's sister, Angie, or Richard's brother, Gus? They had blood ties to Richard, and they were very close to him. Apart from being family members to Richard, can they too be considered as Richard's friends? Yes, they can. Let's look at this example. The friendship between Richard and his father. Richard was very close to his father too. We can see their friendship when Richard's father took him for his first hunting trip. His father took the effort to teach Richard how to hunt, even though Richard disliked killing animals. Furthermore, at the beginning of the story, Richard's father did not agree with Richard's hobby, that was writing poems. Richard had to hide the poems that he wrote in the drawer and kept the key in his wallet. He also had to burn the drafts of the poems because Richard knew his father did not like poems. However, at the end of the story, Richard's father became supportive to Richard. Richard now could write poems freely because of his father's permission. His father even gave some ideas to Richard when he was writing poems. Richard felt the presence of his old friend, Mr. Joyce Kilmer, when he was listening to his father's suggestions or corrections on his poems. Richard was really comfortable with his father's company. At the end of the story, Richard's poem was published by the Turtle Lake Weekly newspaper. His father was a great father and a great friend to Richard as well. Does the example make sense to you? Yes, it does, doesn't it? Is Gus a friend to Richard too? Let's look at the argument. The friendship between Richard and his brother Gus. Gus was Richard's older brother. Nevertheless, they have different characteristics. Gus was an average student at school. He liked sports and socializing with his friends. Richard, on the other hand, was doing well at school. Richard did not like sports. In spite of their contrasting characteristics, they have one thing in common. They love each other very much. When Gus was listed to join the army, Richard was very sad. He knew he could lose his brother in the war, as he has lost his best friend, Mr. Kilmer. At the end of the novel, the war was finally ended. It was a relief to Richard when his brother would be saved at home by not joining the army. This shows how strong the friendship between Richard and Gus was. Now, let's look at Richard's friendship with his sister Angie. The friendship between Richard and Angie. Richard's mother died when he was 7 years old, and Angie was 9 years old. Angie quit school and began taking mother's job. She cleaned the house, cooked for the family, and washed everyone's clothes. It was a heavy task for a little girl like Angie. Angie also did a lot of farming jobs. Richard knew Angie had sacrificed a lot for the family. Richard also often helped Angie in the kitchen and also in the farm. Angie was like a very special friend to him. What about Richard's friendship with his teacher, Mrs. Hanson? The friendship between Richard and Mrs. Hanson. Mrs. Hanson was Richard's English teacher. She was a very caring and helpful teacher. When Mrs. Hanson read a poem by Mr. Joyce Kilmer, Richard was amazed by the poem. It was because of Mrs. Hanson Richard knew about Mr. Kilmer. Mrs. Hanson has sparked a new beginning of a wonderful friendship between a 15-year-old Richard and a famous poet, Mr. Kilmer. Mrs. Hanson was also very proud of Richard when he took the responsibility to send the sympathy card to Hannah by himself. Mrs. Hanson was surprised that Richard could also write beautiful poems. She helped Richard choose a suitable poem to be posted to Mr. Kilmer. Richard had always become her favorite student. The friendship between Richard and Mrs. Hanson was undeniably strong. Dear students, could you repeat the names of Richard's friends? Let's repeat together. The names of Richard's friends are Hannah Shermer, Mr. Kilmer, Richard's father, Richard's brother Gus, Richard's sister Angie, and Richard's English teacher, Mrs. Hanson. Alhamdulillah, all praise be to Allah. Now you have understood on how to answer the question on friendships between the main character and other characters in the novel, and you are able to describe how their friendships developed. Dear students, we have reached the end of our discussion. Do remember to be creative while answering the novel question. Good luck to all of you on your trial exam, and most importantly in your SPM exam next year. Love our Malaysia as it should be loved. Happy Merdeka Day. I am Mr. Syed. Until then, bye-bye.